Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, representing Mesura team to talk about identity and architecture. And since identity is built upon the idea of context, let me introduce a little bit what's our context, the Mesura context of the 5 partners. So this is a story that started a while ago, 2011, 5 partners, just finished the school, full of egos, full of expectations, and full of ambition. So this was our individual kind of identity. Also the background, our context was coming all from Barcelona, so sharing kind of the Barcelona architecture values, and even more, we are the football team of the School of Architecture. So we were educated in the same school, and we were discussing before during lunch how the stamp of the school can also influence in the idea of the architecture. And most of it, this is 2011 when we started the company, but the idea of us starts 2010, let's say. The context in Spain was 2000, 2009 was the kind of explosion of architecture, the bubble. So 2008, Spain built the same amount of housing as Germany, England, France, and Italy together. So we finished school, and we had everything ready to be the ones building the new icons. But the party was over. There were no buildings to be built. Spain was bankrupt, and especially the construction. So there we are, a team of 5, and no job, no commissions, and kind of no identity. But at least we decided to have some values, or at least an attitude. And this is where the Mesura name comes from, so coming from Latin of the idea of measure, which is related to architecture. We try to be telling something beyond the idea of the architects, and it was kind of a commitment for moderation, like an idea of contentment. And also, and it's in the meaning of the word in Spanish, but also translated to other languages, this idea of respect to the past and respect to kind of like a way of doing. And this also comes from the more Mediterranean Italian, like Spanish, like meaning this idea, the su misura, something made, like tailor-made for someone. So there we are, 5, no job, at least some values or some attitudes. And then we say we need to do something. And then we went for a competition, because in fact we were playing together football, but we had never before done some architecture together. So we decided to apply for a competition, and the one that was the best at that moment, and still I think it's like extremely valid opportunity for architects, is the Europan, which is an urban competition that challenges, brings challenges from some cities to under 40 architects. And at that time, it was a project in the city of Dubrovnik, and the city of Dubrovnik, it's kind of like a success story, apparently, because it's a city like extremely visited by many, and it's like a UNESCO protected and remodeled city after the Civil War, and has like a very interesting like tissue or fabric, which is the old city and the new development, which is mostly housing, and you can see how dense is this part of the city. So this is consistent in some cities in Europe, which gives us like amazing like fabric and location, and kind of the sustainability that we are preaching, which is density is what we should do, mixed use is what we should do, but suddenly mixed use is lost here. And public realm also kind of finds a difficult way to fit. You can see when you have the walls that it's difficult to grow or to adapt and have some flexibility. And apparently this was the idea of the Europan. The Europan wanted to link the old city and the new part. But we realized that the problem was not exactly that the city needed to connect to the outer part and grow, but that the city was left for the tourists. Density in the city was extremely successful, but not for local citizens. So we saw, and this is a phenomenon that we all know, like in Venice, that once you are successful, you are at the risk of dying of that success. This idea of like boats coming with 4,000 tourists, that they arrive consistently at the same time and they bring the tourists to the same places, was killing the city. So much that when these boats arrive, they rise on flags so the citizens, they can exit the city and give way to the tourists. So this was the condition. All city UNESCO protected. Some developments like the park, like a sports center and other big developments. And we know how this works. We know how mayor works. Probably they didn't pay very much attention to what was happening in Spain, but they still wanted an icon. They wanted Norman Foster to build a project, literally, here. But someone said, like, no, let's do a European, so we have like some other ideas and some foreign ideas that maybe they show us like a different approach. So we discussed also about the idea of how like a foreign view can maybe be more aware of what's unique or of local interest. But reality is that cities or mayors, they work like this. They have a problem, they have a plot. So the problem needs to be solved in the plot. This was the plot. This is a plot here in the available land to build. So here was going to be the new development that was going to solve all the problems of the city. It was going to be 5 stories underground parking because they needed more parking. This was still the idea that if you put more parking or if you put more roads, then the traffic is going to be better. 5 stories basement, rock, and then 5 stories on top, which was going to be like a massive new icon for the city. And they wanted it to be the new National Library, the new like civic center, housing on top with lofts on top to sell and provide some money to accomplish this. And then we tried to understand. I must confess that when we were developing this project, I haven't been in the profiting yet, which is extremely more interesting, how global practice is developing, that you can enter a competition without even visiting the site. So we did some abstract analysis and we realized that there were some obvious things. So obvious that maybe during the brief of the program, they passed. This is the main entrance, this is the secondary entrance of the wall, and this is like a kind of like leftover entrance. So the idea of the city to reconnect with the outer part was going to be in the most disadvantaged part, because this is a slope, in the most disadvantaged part of the city. So both this idea of going against 400 years of history, and also the idea that a new icon was not needed when this is one of the UNESCO World Heritage buildings that has its own identity and doesn't need someone more clever to come and bring a new identity, made us decide to do a promenade. We decided that the brief had to be split in 3. We wanted to maintain the idea of a new connection here, but also enhancing these 2 entrances with some program. And also, we didn't want to design the buildings. We wanted to follow what was already working over there. So following these learning that we had in the school of Camillo Sitte, how do you design a plaza? How do you put a church in a plaza? We just put the conditions of how these buildings, they should be related between each other to create a new belt around the wall. You can see that if we don't paint our buildings in color, in red, you don't know which one was already there and which one is new. which was something that we wanted to value, even in our drawing. And then this promenade was going to be the new development that was going to be offered to the city as an escape path, both for tourists and citizens. So we ended having like only 2 basements of like parking, but in fact, most of it was going to be also this space and this space that there was going to be the library and space to use. And I didn't want to show the final rendering for 2 reasons. One, it's like already 8 years old, it looks terrible. Second one, it was not important. The important idea is that we said this cannot be accomplished, but a new icon building, this needs to be a new attitude, a new promenade. And we were talking about like science, and we were talking about like flags. Our project finally was this. This was the title of the European competition, Back to Citizens. This became the logo or the kind of like motto of the political party of the mayor during 2 different like rounds for the elections. And this was the idea of the city has been living at the back of its own citizens. This is going to be built in the back of the city, but this is meant to be back to you. This is back to citizens. So this became our like starting point as a company. This was 2011. We know how these projects work. UNESCO was not against, was supporting this entry. That's why we're the winners. But political reasons got in the middle, and this is still ongoing. But people are still talking about the idea of back to citizens. So at least we didn't build the building, we were building the idea. Then this is a second project that kind of landed in our table, which is rebuilding a castle, 9th century, that in the beginning was meant to be just like a little touch in the building because it was privately owned and they wanted to have some money about it. So they wanted to build a little restaurant and they wanted some landscape to just like rearrange the outer part of the courtyard. And well, this is a project in the coast of Catalonia. This is a beautiful location in which the landmark is already there, which is this castle. Pedra tallada means piedra cortada, like cut stone, because all the territory except this like beautiful like greenery taking part of it is built with the same stone. So we were to build something here, and this is again, how do you do something new when you have such a heritage? We found that the tower had like a basement of the 1st century Roman. So understanding, and we understand things through drawing, mostly, architects we do this. And then this idea of mesura, of contentment that we were talking about, moderation, made us decide to do like a little podium. There was a swimming pool to be made. This was on the brief. But then we decided to do something with natural stone of the area that was not available and was extremely expensive. And we thought it had to be solid. But the client said, like, this is your ego as an architect. I'm not going to pay your idea of boldness. I don't want to pay for the full stones. I just want it to look that it's covered in that stone. So we found a way of reusing these, which was a leftover of another project from a quarry, and it was a leftover because it was already cut in pieces and no one wanted to use these with already cut pieces. So we did like a listing. You cannot see here, but this is a pattern of 1 meter and 1 meter in which we fit each of these pieces, composing like a poem, A, B, C, B, A, or A, B, B, A, like kind of like a homage to what was the idea of the stone, and they were solid. So the final result is just a little podium that relates with the tower. It doesn't compete. It's, of course, something that has its presence and has its different grammar. It's something contemporary, but it's not meant to compete. Then the rest of the castle was just like clean, make it like fulfill some regulations, and in some point in which it was needed, this was also meant to be like a place for congresses and weddings. We just added the program needed, but again, same stone, let the tower be the protagonist, and that's it. And this was the main room. We found these paintings, which are the oldest paintings in that region in Catalonia. And this is the result. We built a swimming pool. But the attitude in which we built this granted us the full project, the full commission of restoring the castle of Peratallada, in which we are still working. Then, at that time, it was kind of like strange because we were the winners of the Europan. We were doing the renovation of a castle. But to be honest, Europan didn't bring any money. This was very time consuming, so it was not money. And we started working for retail. And retail, for us, it was kind of like the evil. It's working to make money, designing spaces to make more money. But then at some point, we realized that the investor behind the project in Dubrovnik has told us at that time something extremely important that passed. And he said, I voted for your project. And I say, why? And he said, because the one you design has a much longer storefront in which I can make stores and restaurants and lease them extremely more feasible and extremely more beneficial than the 5 stories building that the mayor wanted to do. So we realized that we can do architecture that complies with UNESCO requirements, and we can also comply with our clients' needs. And also, we realized working with retail that there's a huge amount of private money spent in building malls, which are huge extents of territory, that they apply an extremely thorough knowledge into fluxes, circulations, and how you spend money. Why don't we also bring the know-how of these places becoming some places to live better? And suddenly, the idea of the mall was dead. The idea of going to buy in a mall was over with Amazon, and then the malls wanted to be a new destination. So it was a match. They didn't want people experts in retail, they wanted good architects. So we started doing new approaches to malls. This is the idea of mall, the American way, huge parking, and then just the convenience of having everything there. All dressed in beautiful materials, and it works. But now, there's this new idea of communities, and that people only buy brands with which they feel attached. And then, it's something that needs to be fulfilling for the visitor, not only convenient, because at a click, you have more convenience. So we decide, why was the mall being like a landmark and creating like a destination, this idea of oasis? Why don't we do the idea of like high street, of a neighborhood, creating intermediate space? And we started like setting quality moments, connecting, and the idea of telling a story, building an identity for the mall, creating a neighborhood itself. So coming from this kind of morphology in section and in plan, going to this one, and the idea of this needed to be curated. This had to have an attitude, even like vegan, healthy, or sporty, or techno, whatever. But it needed an identity, and the architecture could help building this identity. So nowadays, the kind of like way to build communities or create some engagement normally is through food. So we created an idea of a gastro destination with markets and many other kind of like a leisure options, but also The approach of like pedestrian is again important. The parking, it's not the most important designing thing when you design a mall, not anymore. It's the idea of creating a destination and the idea of building a community that they want to go to your space, regardless they buy it or not. So we kind of like completely destroyed the original idea of customer journey that was based on the pains and the strong points in which you would buy and spend more money, to an idea of creating an engagement. Like you feel attached to that building and then you come there often and you will end spending money. So this was the result. This is a project approved in which what we designed were the leftovers, the void spaces, the public realm, which is private, but becomes part of the building. Then I want to add another project. This was coordinated by us. I teach in the School of Architecture. And it was very much related to the idea of identity. 2014 was the 300th anniversary of a battle that we lost in the process of a new king in Spain, in which we were supporting the wrong one. And then there was this anniversary that the city wanted to celebrate. And we were immersed, not as much as now, but it was the beginning. We were immersed in a very political like conflict, nonsense. So they wanted to do an approach that was more civic and was more neutral. So two things were interesting. Students, they seem like more, less threatening, university. And then the idea of architecture being a way of celebrating. So the idea came to the Enric Miralles Foundation. So Benedetta Tagliabue was the curator. And then we organized in the school, together with two professors, Josep Ferrando and Eugeni Bach, and 18 students, a project that we did together with the city, together with a foreign school, the USC in Los Angeles, and together with a foreign studio, which is Urbanus in China. A total mix that was going to be like a complete disaster. What was the idea? The topic was to build the identity of the Catalan house in 1714. How do you start? With location. We were giving a space in the city, which is one of the most important spaces. This is by the cathedral, in front of the College of Architects, with the paintings of Picasso. This was the entrance of the city at that time, and this was the market in which people were bringing goods to sell, agricultural. And the beginning of the idea is to show the difference between the square, the public space, the city, and the behavior of the people 300 years ago and today. So if you can see in the picture, there was a building here, and now it's not. So this behaves like a big square. This is the cathedral. This is the College of Architects. And this was two separate ones. So we wanted to show this condition with the same duality, so showing how it was disconnected and how it was connected at the same time. So we saw about the footprint, the legacy, what was there, and there was like the leftovers again of a Roman arch. And we say, why don't we do something that it's not mimicking the former aqueduct, but can resemble how this was behaving 300 years ago? So we decided to build a pavilion that was going to be a little transparent, to divide the square, but you could see it open at close at the same time. And tectonically, the idea of tectonics was going to be important. We're going to show how was this 300 years ago and how is it today. So how do you build like open space in the Roman times? Through arches. This was the only way to open like big spaces. And then this is serving some public space up front. And how can you do this with new technology? And it was not new, but this is the catenaria used by Gaudí, but you can do like a new geometry that opens the idea of this cantilever space that gives another kind of condition to the space. So this was the render that we presented to the city. In both sides, you can see here the kind of like openings that it creates in one side, and the other kind of space that it opens to the smaller one. And this was the model that was presented to the jury and was selected. And this is interesting because we were talking all the time about identity, and we kind of like were not wanting to get inside the real trouble of talking about Catalan. And at some point we said, like, we need to face it. We're talking about the Catalan identity and what's Catalan and what's identity. So the architect from Urbanos, and with this idea very far away from China, he said like, oh, you have this super significant icon, which is the human castles. And I said like, wow, this is too Pinterest. We're not going to do a Sagrada Familia. We're not going to do, we put the Arch of Gaudí, but this is too much. But then someone said like, no, no, no. This is clever because a human castle, it's like people like joining hands and created a bigger structure than themselves. And that is a community. So the Catalan identity, regardless they are a nation, a country, or just a community, they feel engaged. And the idea of like joining hands was very poetical and was also very tectonic. So we decided to build this pavilion out of 8,000 pieces of bamboo, because it's like extremely strong, that were going to be built by the students to create a newer identity through the addition of these pieces. These are the professors and Xiaodu from Urbanos in the process in the school, with the students participating. We wanted this to be a very horizontal design, so the students were responsible. The students presented the project in front of the authorities, and the students were building the project. So finally, this was the result. These pieces, they looked like crosses in the beginning, which was not very poetical or kind of like what we were celebrating, but it started to look like this. And the students got extremely engaged with the idea, so it became part of their own identity. Even Xiaodu was flying from China again to build the project. And then this became the new symbol of the Tricentenario, which was the celebration of a battle lost through a more poetical celebration, which was this idea of like identity. This pavilion was so successful, people got really engaged with this idea. There were like places to read, there were performances, that it was meant to be there for 3 months. After 3 months, they wanted to leave it there permanently, and we had to oppose this because it was designed to be removable, and it was starting to suffer from the people like climbing to get selfies and to get their Instagram on top of. So it was started to get like very dangerous. But for the students and for us, it was really a reward to see how the public were kind of like accepting these as a part of their own public landscape, when it was something that was extremely like a satellite, something that came and was occupying the public space. So I think that was a very successful result. And just finally, I just added, it was not in my presentation, but out of a conversation, I wanted to add this. This is a competition that we are participating in, and is an NDA we cannot disclose, like brief or whatever. But this is the idea of Jeddah, that opposing the idea of Riyadh, that they are building a new city full of icons, full of glass, and they're demolishing everything that looks historical because they are nomads and they don't have this idea of like belonging. Here, the city of Jeddah is a city-state, 3,000 years old, and the door to Mecca, and it's full of identity. At some point, the authorities decided to build a new city here. This is the new one with the new buildings and the kind of like successful districts. But somehow, the young people here are starting to occupy this place, and especially the arts community, and they're starting to do like performances without anyone behind until the new government, they're supporting the idea. This in 2014 was presented to UNESCO. 2015 it was approved immediately, and now it's going to be completely renewed. And the idea is to create new icons. And I was like, oh my God, again. But the icons mean that they want to restore these. These are the new icons. They were so lost in their own memory that now this becomes again an icon. It becomes like a flag for them. And the project is to restore all these that are buildings like 200, 300 years old, full of history, full of like memories, into something that creates a hub for attraction in the city. Which is a challenge, because now we need to deal with the idea of like, how do you renew this? Do you follow the same grammar? Do you add new kind of like languages here? But this is another story. The idea is to bring back the atmosphere. We were talking about attitudes, we were talking about traditions. I think what people expect here is to bring back some of these kind of like lifestyle that was lost, and they kind of like imported something that it's not theirs, and they want to bring it back. And finally, because I wanted to be short, we're talking about the identity of Mesura. The identity of Mesura started with an attempt of some kind of like attitude with the 5 partners. But is that enough? No, it's not. And nowadays, we are a team. We are a growing team. This is part of it. We are now 35 people. And our identity is bringing talent together. And this idea of collaborating, we are in a wall of co-living, we are in a wall of co-working. Of course, is a time for co-designing. So we try to encourage the idea that everyone participates in the projects. So this is how we work. This is our offices now, like an open space, like a laboratory. Everyone can participate in the presentations. We present the projects to the rest of the team so they are aware of what's happening, because we can do like 10, 12 projects at a time. And this is a way of like people jumping from their own seat and participating and adding value to the other projects, but also client focused. Yeah, this looks very marketing, but this is how we do it. We discovered the idea of like projects are for the hero. This is what they say in retail now. The hero is a client. In architecture, the client is the user, the final user. But also, you have another user, which is your own client. Here, this is a picture with the CEO of Desigual in the office. We are like building the new strategy with him. There's no point of this architect that was kind of confronting the client, and everything that he cannot do is because the client doesn't allow me. He knows the brief. He doesn't know the solution, but he can help in remodeling, rebuilding the strategy of the brief in order to see new opportunities. But you need to incorporate it somehow in the process. So we bring them, they contribute to the projects, and I think this is part of the success, this idea of the tailor-made that we are accomplishing. But finally, this is our team. We do every Tuesday, we do a talk. Some people in the office, they can explain something that matters to him or her, We invite people from outside to talk about like art or social or politics or whatever. So finally, the only identity that we have is like a common sharing of a passion for architecture. So we have discovered that Mesura is an attitude, but then the power that runs in our veins is the passion for architecture. Thank you very much.